What is the best game to ever come day and date to Game Pass? What is like the most critically acclaimed Game Pass game ever?
Hi-Fi Rush.
Really?
I mean, I would like, based on what I can recall, I would have a hard time imagining that anything is.
I think we got to disqualify it though. I think that we got to look
it's
at
not third party.
Yeah.
All right, third party.
I sent you guys in the chat a list where you can see all of the day one Game Pass games to release. So my take is that perhaps I think there is a through line where you can see certain situations of games that they took the money because they weren't confident in the release. Stuff like Atomic Heart, Outriders. There was another one that we talked about as well. But there's many examples of games that are absolutely excellent that really didn't need to launch on Game Pass, but did. Wolong recently, very good. Persona 4 Golden didn't need to launch on Game Pass for sure. The TMNT Shredder's Revenge is a game that would have sold without being on Game Pass. So that's why I say perhaps. I think it really depends on a game by game basis. I mean, and I know this is kind of a different category, but Silksong is coming out on Game Pass day one. They absolutely don't need to do that, but they are.
Yeah,
and
the money must be real. You know, who knows?
Yeah, so I think that it is a possibility. I think that in certain situations, for example, like Atomic Heart, I think that is a situation where you see a kind of relatively unknown developer release a game that looks pretty high budget, that almost looks slightly too good to be true, and then you see it's coming out on a Game Pass, then yeah, I think that we have seen that through line a few times. But I think it was on a few weeks ago that I said I made that point that, but I made the point that these games, there's a through line, and so upon further research, I still think that is somewhat true, but not as true as I once said.
Yeah, it's interesting. And looking at this list of games, I mean, there's a lot of good games here, a lot of great games. But I think the biggest one might be like Back 4 Blood. Or
people hate that game.
What'd you say?
People hated that game.
Oh,
that game died.
Oh, I thought that it like just died because it was older. I didn't know that people didn't like it immediately.
No.
And then the Outer Worlds, that came to Game Pass, I guess, immediately before the.
Yeah, but that's. No. That was after the acquisition, was it?
Yeah, I don't know. It's on here. It says it's been these games have been ready for action on Game Pass since day one. So I think it did. So that would have been 2019. So and there are games I like on here, and there are games that I love on here. Chained Echoes is a really great game. Obviously, Outriders was a huge success, but I agree with you. Here's what I'm perplexed about with this is we don't have the paradigm breaking example yet of what we would all consider to be a slam dunk AAA third party game that chooses to go to this place. And I think it's very similar to what happens with Netflix. Like Netflix has a ton of exclusive content, but they pay for it. They make it, they produce it. That's what's necessary. All the other stuff they gleam onto and pay licensing rights to, but that's not the first marriage for either of those products, right? Like when a movie comes to Netflix that was in the theater, that's its second or third marriage, as opposed to these initial marriages. So my concern about Game Pass and why I think it might be where A and AA games go is just because I don't see anyone breaking the mold and saying like, we have to get this money. We got to put our game here. Because here's an important component of this that I never really considered until recently. We brought up Back 4 Blood, right? So that's a great example of a game where you have Back 4 Blood and it's a Warner game, right? So WB money, right? And so even though they can't share that information about how much money they made and how their game did and et cetera and so on there, they know how their game did. So they would make future decisions based on that. But there are no other big WB games that came after that. You know what I mean? So it's not like they're getting loads of repeat customers that say like, this deal is too good to be true for us. We need to get in on this deal. I still think most publishers are going to want to sell their games on a case by case basis. So that's my interpretation, is just that. So you're going to get games with low upside and what I think would be considered high downside in the fact that they might just die on the vine completely, if not for Game Pass, and they're getting their money and they're getting what's good. But you don't want your subscription to be known for that. that's why I think it's so important that first and second party gets going, and why Hi-Fi Rush I think is such an important game, but also more importantly Redfall and then Starfield.
Yeah,
And they got to get it going with I think more high quality games than this. Anyway, do you have anything you want to add, Chris, before we move on?
I've been thinking a lot about whether or not, because we saw AA kind of go away for a while. I think we saw this at the beginning of maybe the PS4 and the Xbox One generation, where like it was pretty much all you really had was AAA and indie, and that was kind of it for a while. And then you started to see this kind of increase in AA as the generation went on. And I almost wonder, and it's, by the way, remained pretty consistent. Like we're getting a pretty healthy amount of AA titles. And I wonder if subscription services are almost kind of the reason why that happened. Because you kind of have these studios who are able to now maybe put down it's still a lot of money, but like a less demanding amount of money to make something that might be like a little bit risky, but it's not that huge of a risk because they're not blowing like hundreds of millions of dollars on it. And then if it sells, if it sells well or if it sells poorly or whatever the outcome is, you're going to have a subscription service looking for it because subscription services thrive on content. And I think maybe it seems like a very possible reality where the resurgence of AA games is largely being subsidized by the necessity of subscription services to have a consistent drip feed of content. And if you didn't have AA games, like maybe you wouldn't have such robust subscription services. And I wonder if that's happening, or if that's salient at all.
It makes me wonder to that point. Microsoft feels like with this Activision deal, for instance, that they want Call of Duty, they want all these things, which makes perfect sense, of course. But you would think that the publisher that might be most interesting to them would actually be Embracer. Because if you just need churn, like new shit all the time, then that might be the team. Those might be the teams that you go invest in it. And it's, to your point, low downside, low upside, because no one's going to really buy these games anyway. So because Embracer to me is going to be in trouble, as I keep saying. I just think that they're just not long for this world in their current form, that there's going to be some truncation there because their games can't possibly sell. But if you marry a pipeline like that to a subscription service, it might be a different story entirely. I'll continue to be interested to see, like, we still don't have that true AAA game, which to me indicates everyone knows where money's actually made in the industry still. And yeah, Atomic Hearts is a good representation of those kinds of games, but there's no disrespect to that. I loved Nobody Saves the World. I thought Outriders was awesome. I thought Tunic was pretty cool. They're not missing. It's just, that's not very impressive to me either. And I have no problem buying those games. It's like you said, Dustin, about TMNT. It's like, I have no problem buying this. None.
I think the only part of the question that I have an issue with is the idea that it's where AA games go to die. And I would argue it's just where AA games go to survive as best they can.
Well, that's what he said. He does say that, to be fair. He does say our subscriptions where publishers send their A or AA games. So I tried to correct that earlier, that I didn't mean to indicate that.
Oh, okay.
Although that does seem to be his notion. But but it's just where they're sending their games, period. Yeah, I think we can all agree with that.